speak now that I feel semi-naked up here. So, hey. Oh, it's so nice to just be here and share space with real humans in storytelling. And when Jake asked me to speak at this event and shared the pretext of tell a story of a moment that changed your life forever, I actually found it really hard to choose a story. Firstly, because for myself, I feel like there's actually lots of moments that have caused catalyzing change. And secondly, I realize that so many of those moments, though incredibly transformational and powerful to me, may have been incredibly boring for you to listen to. So, in choosing a story to tell, I thought, what better than a story of the total deconstruction of my reality? And so that I try and stick to the 20 minutes or so that we're given, I have a short list of dot points that I'm going to read to you that we will piece together. Pyramids on a lake, nightly deaths, tripping without drugs, the impossible made real, the garden of discombobulation, not getting stabbed, and the adventure of life. Here we go. Let's see where this takes us. Might be like a interesting dot-to-dot painting. So my whole life I've been a dreamer in all senses of the word. A big imagination, a daydreamer by day, and a very active, lucid dreamer by night. In my early 20s, I woke up one morning from an extremely vivid dream with one message. And that message was, in the middle of the jungle in Guatemala, you will find a lake. And on that lake, you will find yourself. So, what else does someone do in their early 20s but follow that? Much to the dismay of my mother, who was absolutely certain at that time that everyone in Guatemala was a thief or a drug lord, and I was definitely going to die. But I went. And in the middle of Guatemala, in the jungle, on a lake, I did find myself. And this is the story. I arrived and I found this center of what was advertised as a center of meditation, yoga, and metaphysics. And I thought I would immerse myself there for a 1-month-long journey, diving in to find myself. Couldn't be anything more fun, right? On the very first night I arrived, I was a few days early for the course, and I went to sleep. And then this thing happened. This thing that was actually the trauma of my entire childhood. As a child, I was absolutely terrified of the sun setting and the night coming upon me. I would go to bed, and more than often, as I was falling asleep or at some time during the night, I would start to have this feeling. This ringing would happen in my ears, and it would feel like my eardrums were about to burst. My whole body would heat up, start to tingle, and I would feel like I was being torn apart into 1,000 pieces. I'd do everything as a child to try and make this stop. I honestly felt like I was going to die. And often I would wake up in this sort of sleep paralysis, not being able to make sound or talk or yell for my parents. I would run to their bedroom and tell them I had a nightmare. And then, after many executions of this happening, I went to a couple of sleep specialists and they gave me some tools, and it would happen on and off during my life. On my first night arriving in Guatemala, however, it happened again. I went to bed and this ringing started. I felt like I was being torn off the bed and I was certain I was going to die. The second night, the same thing. The third night, the same thing again. And so on the fourth morning, I went and hunted down the woman who owned the place, who was a 5th generational Guatemalan shaman. Her name was Chatty, and I said, Chachi, there is something wrong with my room. There are some like entities up in there or something, and I can't sleep and I feel like I'm going to die. I'm having the same trauma that happened in my childhood. And she looked at me and she said, Bueno, sí, you're going to astral travel. And I said, no, I'm going to die. And she said, okay, bueno, die. Go to bed tonight and try dying. Come back tomorrow. So I went to bed. In her confidence, she walked away. And, for sure, on the fourth night, the same thing happened. This time, however, I realized that I could not live one more night in that fear of death. And it was certainly a better option to just simply die than to have to live that again. And so I did. I surrendered to that ear-piercing sound and that heat and that pressure, and then almost instantaneously, I popped out. I arrived. There I was, in the nothing, in the deep void of the black and in the nothing. My first thought, I'm probably dead. My second thought, I don't feel any fear or any pain at all. In fact, I felt this sense of aliveness, of power. I looked around for someone to tell or something to do or something to see, and I got really excited. And I woke up in my bed. And I realized at that moment the exact same action that had been this absolute fear my whole life became something that I was immediately and intensely curious about going into again. So I ended up spending almost 6 months in this retreat, which turned out to be a retreat for lucid dreaming and astral travel. And the sole purpose of my days was to do practices and actions to help me wake up at night. I was given a mission by the shaman there, which was, the one thing you need to do is have enough lucidity in your dreams to wake up and to come at night time to the temples to learn, just like we do in the day. So that's what I began doing. I began practicing to hold lucidity for long enough, to hold awareness for long enough, to astral travel so that I could go learn from, I don't know who, some masters in another dimension, in another realm. And let me tell you, along that journey, some weird shit started to happen. I would wake up in the morning and I would have a shower and look at myself in the mirror and say, oh, that's not my face. I'll sit back down. That's not my face. My skin started sometimes to melt into what seemed to be the air around it. So I went looking for consult of Chati again. I explained my experiences to her. She said, "Sí, bueno, it's the same when you're on mushrooms." "Oh, I've never had mushrooms," I said. "Oh, sí, same as on ayahuasca." I've never had ayahuasca either." "Okay, LSD?" Actually, I've never had like any drugs at all. I used to drink alcohol, but I don't do that either. The smile that came upon her face in that moment. "Bueno, stay there," she said. "Don't look at anyone, don't talk to anyone, don't read anything. Stay in the spiral." She explained to me that when we take plant medicines or drugs or any of these kind of things, they take our hand. They open a doorway, take us through, show us on a journey and adventure, and they decide when we get to come back. She said, "You are learning to do this on your own, in your own body, but you are just a beginner, so stay there." And I did, in this very strange and confusing reality. On one night in my sleep, I managed to pop out into the astral and I remembered, yes, it's time. I'm going to go to the temple and I'm going to learn from these masters, whoever they are, and I'm going to get some enlightenment or something. So off I went in my dream space, in my astral body, back to the temple that we learned in during the day. I walked in, and sure enough, I saw other students walking in. And I saw what I thought were teachers and masters also walking in, including Chatti herself. In my excitement, just as I went to sit down and learn, I lost my lucidity, which in the dream space, if any of you have experienced waking in your dreams, you know can happen quite fast. And so, in the dream space, I then got up, walked straight through the middle of the room. I cooked myself something, the dream continued until I woke up in my bed. And I woke up in my bed and I thought to myself, what if that was real? What if that actually happened? I mean, I know that I believe in this stuff and I'm here practicing to do it every day, but it hadn't really dawned upon me that what did it mean if that was real? So the next morning I got up and I did the same thing we did every morning. I went to the temple to meditate. I walked in silence, and I sat down directly across from Chatti. And every morning she would do the same thing. Sit in silence, look at you, and gong her meditation bowl. This morning, however, she looked directly into my eyes as I sat down, held up her bowl, and she said, "When you come to class at night, you sit down, you stay, and you learn." Bing! Needless to say, that was the worst meditation of my entire life because I spent the next hour deconstructing the nature of reality. What does that mean? Was she really there? Was I really there? If that's real and this is real, well, which reality is more real than the other one? I didn't know. I couldn't find any answers. And from there, the spiral went in a direction I didn't really enjoy. I was deep into about 2 months of silence at this point, so looking for advice from anyone else wasn't going to be an option either. I sat down in the garden a few days later, almost trying to distract myself, and I thought, I'm just going to meditate and observe this plant. This was the garden of my discombobulation. As I observed the plant, I noticed a voice in my head that said, I am observing that I'm observing the plant. Wait a minute. Then who is the observer? There must be more than 3 of me. There's the one who observes the observer, but also I'm observing that the observer observing the observer to observe the plant. And then, within what felt like a split second, I seemed to have the observational perspective of every single mind capable in the universe. And it was loud, and it was noisy, and it was horrible. And so I asked for one thing. I asked for nothing. And do you know what's so much more terrifying than the voice of every observational perspective? It's nothing. And in that moment, I felt like my brain had split in half, that I could only have the perspective of everything or nothing, and there was no bridge in between. I thought to myself, you know what? My mum was right. This is not a good place to go. This place is for crazy people, and this is not what normal people do, and it's not the decision you should make in your early 20s. I was looking for words to put to what I was feeling, and I thought, schizophrenia. Maybe I've gone schizophrenic. I am never going to be able to have a normal conversation with anyone ever again in my entire life. And you know what the worst part was? I thought to myself, at least if this happened through alcohol, I could go to an AA meeting. Or maybe if I was taking drugs, I could have rehab. But no, this was self-induced mental psychosis through dreaming? Through meditation? I thought the only place for someone like me at this stage is in a mental institution with a straitjacket. So I did the only rational thing I could think of in the moment, which was to continue on the journey. I just totally surrendered to the fact that this was my new reality, one that made no sense. And I thought, Such a shame, I'm so young. Didn't really see my life panning out like this, but that's who I'm going to be. A few days before the end of my 2-month silence, I decided to take a walk by the lake. And there's this beautiful cliff top path on this walk. And as I was walking in my delirium, I felt someone walking up quite fast behind me. And then all of a sudden, a hand on my handbag. I turned around and there was this tall Guatemalan behind me with one hand on my handbag and in the other hand a screwdriver. And he started yelling at me, "Give me your quetzales!" Quetzales being the Guatemalan currency. "Give me your quetzales! Give me your quetzales!" And I just stared at him, straight in the eyes, and I thought, I wonder if I'm dreaming or awake. Staying in complete eye contact, him like this. I thought, oh, this cliff behind me, if I'm dreaming, I could probably just jump off it and fly somewhere else. And then looking at him, I thought, you know what? I bet you're a teacher or a guide and you've got a message for me, and this is a test. I just got to figure out the right question. He starts yelling again, "Give me your quetzales or I'll stab you!" Still staring in his eyes, I do actually have the thought of, well, what if I'm not dreaming? What if I'm awake? And the first thing that came to my head was, I really like my handbag and I'd like that back. So calm as a cucumber, still staring in his eyes, I gently moved my hand towards his, put it on top, and started pulling my handbag back towards myself. And in that moment, I saw the power shift change. I saw his pupils get smaller, and I saw him physically embody fear. He looked at me as if I was deranged and cursed, and he had no idea what was going on. He kind of shook his head and took a few steps back and started swearing at me in Spanish, and proceeded to turn around and run full pelt in the other direction. Me, left standing there with my handbag, still staring off into the distance, pondering, am I dreaming or awake? And in that moment, I realized though I had surrendered myself to this life that I thought was of someone clearly mentally not sane, I thought, you know what? It's all going to be okay, because I think my delusional state just saved my life. Now, there's actually a lot more to the other side of that story that proves that's true, but we only have a short amount of time tonight. So, come more than a decade later after that, I'm able to sit here and have conversations with you all, be comfortable in my own state, and I've spent more than a decade now really journeying down this rabbit hole of deconstruction of reality. This wise old woman who has a documentary written about her called My Mother Speaks to Aliens. Don't worry, aliens definitely had to come up. Once said to me, we can never discriminate from people's realities. And that's been a big line in my cause of adventure and my quest to playing with reality. What does it actually mean when you can wake up in your dreams, but you can also walk around in the day awake like a sleeping zombie? What does it actually mean to be awake or to be asleep? I went down that road of science, of trying to figure out what is the construct of reality? What is the science of sleep? How does this work in the dream space? And when I finally let go of trying to understand it and instead sitting in the known, I came to realize the real purpose for me, at least in life. And that is simply to adventure with it, to be curious to any of it, and to all of it. To sit in the unknown, because that's where all the possibilities can come up. That's where the state of which seems like your absolute demise and delusion can save your life. So, this is my playful story of adventure and change and discombobulation and deconstructing reality leads for you all tonight.